The Trump administration made it to the White House on the promise to keep free speech free. But are they rolling back that promise once they realize that free speech also applies to people who say mean things about your friends? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about the state of free speech here in America. Now, hit that subscribe button because I know you guys won't. I see every video I do that criticizes the administration. I don't tend to make that many friends. In fact, it loses me subscribers, but that's okay because you're all wrong and I'm right. So, the Pentagon has suspended an Army colonel for what it says is celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. Now, the Pentagon is investigating an active duty colonel. For those of you that don't know, this is a rank above lieutenant colonel. So generally someone with over 20 years of service. This is a flag grade officer. The officer in question is named Scott Stevens, who's been suspended from official duties after social media posts purportedly belonging to him celebrated the killing of Charlie Kirk, the Army told Fox News. Now, again, bear in mind, guys, I don't use Fox News as a source for much because they represent the administration's line. Like, they are truly in lockstep with the administration. But this is actually useful because it gives us the administration's perspective of what they're doing. And the Fox News spin on this is that this Army colonel reportedly made the following post. Quote, "The death of Charlie Kirk in Utah was tragic. However, we can take comfort in the fact that Charlie was doing what he loved best, spreading hate, racism, homophobia, misogyny, transphobia on college campuses," according to one post. He continued, quote, "I would offer empathy, but Charlie hated empathy. As we have been told, in the wake of so many other tragedies, we have to move on. We can't make this political." The colonel was the commander of 1st Battalion, 4th Armored Regiment, 1st Armored Brigade. And then it says, had fashioned himself as an anti-sexual assault crusader in the Army because 5 years ago, he told Task and Purpose he had long been part of the problem with sexual assault and its cover-ups, right? Which is crazy because he says he's an anti-sexual assault crusader and then is like, yo, I covered up for sexual assaults as a commander and I've sort of come to terms with that, and I've chosen in my later years to try to be more vocal and drag my peers along. So what's fascinating is that, again, Fox News out here trying to paint this dude as some kind of turbo leftist. But if you don't know if you know anything about the Army, you know that the Army just assigns in every single unit a sexual assault prevention officer. And it's not a job that you volunteer for. You just get told you're doing it and you have to put on the classes, right? So again, this just reflects a real ignorance. But here's what I thought was more interesting. The Pentagon statement announced last week it would be tracking and, quote, would address active duty personnel who made public comments celebrating Kirk's death. The Pentagon said, quote, "It is unacceptable for military personnel and Department of War civilians." By the way, guys, for those of you keeping track at home, the Department of War is not the official name. It is the Department of Defense. The executive branch tries to unilaterally rename it, but even their own executive order says that it is still the Department of Defense. The Department of War is just an official nickname given to it by the White House. Department of War civilians to celebrate or mock the assassination of a fellow American. The Department of War has zero tolerance for it. This is according to Sean Parnell, a spokesman. Right now, on Saturday, Army Reserve Major Brian Brintliff, who went by Brian Harlow on social media, was suspended after he allegedly wrote several posts cheering on the killing, according to the Daily Caller. He said, quote, "A monster died today. Quote, it's sad Charlie's kids are traumatized for life, but it's not a sad thing he's dead. Zero tolerance to the Department of War." Here's the thing, guys. Fun fact. Freedom of speech includes the freedom to mock people. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, Paul, in uniform, freedom of speech is subject to constraints that a regular American doesn't have. And that is absolutely correct. The reason those restrictions exist in the military, and again, I was an officer for many years and spent considerable time, another 7 years as a federal civilian. The reason those restrictions exist specifically is in the military is twofold. The first is because when you put on the uniform, you represent the military. And that means that you are operating in an official capacity. So sort of like saying, if I text my friend, let's say I'm the spokesman for Pepsi, and I text my friend, "Hey, I love Coca-Cola." That's fine. But if I text "I love Coca-Cola" from Pepsi's official Twitter account, Well, Pepsi's going to be mad, and it's going to be detrimental to Pepsi's business. The same basic principle apply to the Army. They say, listen, if you're out of uniform, it doesn't matter. You have the right as a free American. You're a citizen. But when you're in uniform, you're speaking on behalf of the Army, whether you want to be or not, or the military. You also have this, this constraint of the nature of war, which involves taking on missions of considerable risk. It means unquestioningly following orders. That means that if you create statements that are seen as like prejudicial to the integrity of command. So one of the biggest examples was actually soldiers who opposed the Iraq War. Soldiers who opposed the Iraq War would often go out there and be vocal about that. But if they were on active duty and they were vocal about it in really specific ways, like this is an illegal war or we should not do this, it was seen as, that criticism was seen as being prejudicial to the good order and discipline, because those units might actually be sent to Iraq, right? It's the same reason why it would be unacceptable, for example, for soldiers to sort of gather around the motor pool and have one soldier go, smoking a cigarette going, listen, this deployment coming up, this is bullshit. We're not going to do anything in Afghanistan. This is worthless. We shouldn't go, right? Or if soldiers said that before a patrol, yeah, it's protected speech. It'd be protected speech for a civilian, but it's illegal speech for military. All that to say, Charlie Kirk, again, whose death is tragic and political violence has no business. And I think he was not someone I agree with politically. I agree with very few of his stances. But one of the stances that I do agree with is his stance on free speech absolutism. He himself said, there is no such thing as hate speech. A gross, uncomfortable, annoying speech is permitted in America under the First Amendment. And this is no example. This is no different. The fact is that Charlie Kirk was not an Army officer. He was not in the chain of command. He was not a representative of the United States government. He was not a congressman. He was not a governor. He was not a president. He was not a senior officer. Your opinions, the opinions of the military about Charlie Kirk have nothing to do with good order and discipline within the military, period. And so the fact is that I don't like these posts. Again, I don't like the message that he was a monster. I think it's cheap to sort of call someone you disagree with politically a monster, right? Just like I think it's, kind of cringy to be like, he was racist and a sexist and a misogynist, right? Or he spread hate, racism, homophobia. But guess what, guys? That is protected speech in America. And even if you are in the military, as long as you are not doing it in uniform, you still retain freedom of speech. And again, the incredible thing is that this was not criticism of anyone within the chain of command. This is not criticism of any one of America's elected officials, right? It is just more examples of the administration who came in saying, listen, the left is anti-free speech. They want to impose these de facto restrictions that are originating from the government on what you can and can't say. They're trying to term police the fundamental way people speak. And now they're turning around, and it turns out they were never really free speech warriors. They were just mad that someone else was trying to tell them what to say. So they weren't mad that speech wasn't free. They were just mad that they weren't the ones controlling speech. Here's another great example. It's more troubling than that, because speech is upstream of the rest of the political process, right? How can you say things like, I oppose the Trump administration, right? You have the right to say even more extreme versions. You can have the right to say that the administration, this administration, the previous administration, you have a right to say that they're racists or that they're Nazis. You have a right to say a vast array of things. It is very hard to prove defamation in the United States. And there's a reason. And so when you see quotes like this is White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. This is a direct quote from him. He says, quote, "We will not live in fear, but you," referring to people who criticize Charlie Kirk after his killing, "you will live in exile because the power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you. It will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you have broken the law, take away your freedom." So this is not how law enforcement works, by the way. This is how it works in Russia, where the law enforcement finds a person and then later on invents crimes to seize their assets, to literally put them in exile, which is not a punishment in the United States. We do not exile people. It's seen as cruel and unusual punishment prohibited by the Constitution. Right? But law enforcement doesn't exist simply to hunt someone down, steal their money and power, and then figure out if they've broken a law and imprison them. This is not how America works. And I understand Stephen Miller is a troll, but the fact is that he trolls and nobody ever pushes back on him. And the more unhinged, the more unwell the president seems, the more people like Stephen Miller are empowered, right? And before you sit there and go, "Oh, Paul, you're just some leftist," you can look through my videos. You can see I was unbelievably critical of the Biden administration. I was unbelievably critical even of Tim Walz, who I think misrepresented his military service in some key ways. But the fact is that the American Democratic Party has a problem of not doing anything, but not doing anything at least means that you get to retain your rights and liberties. Here's another example. The same First Amendment that protects freedom of speech, it explicitly says freedom of the press is rolled up in that. And that's true today more than ever. Because again, who decides, am I exercising my individual free speech, or am I a member of the press because I'm talking on YouTube? Is this media? Am I performing media and news and journalism, or am I an individual exercising their right to free expression? The answer is both. And so you see the president wants to continue this. He said today, quote, "I have the great honor of bringing a $15 billion defamation and libel lawsuit against the New York Times, one of the worst and most degenerate newspapers in the history of our country." By the way, guys, the entire net worth of the New York Times company is just $9 billion. So this is obviously like the equivalent of suing somebody for $15 gorgillion, right? It doesn't even make any sense. And defamation and libel, defamation requires spoken falsehoods, which are the New York Times is a print magazine. I mean, I guess maybe they think they're like, oh, well, technically you were defamed on like a podcast or something. But he continues. He says they're a degenerate newspaper, not a crime, a virtual mouthpiece for the radical left, not a crime. I view it as the single largest illegal campaign contribution ever. No, that's not. A campaign contribution is monetary. Supporting a candidate is, again, a right prescribed by the Constitution. It's no more than, you don't see me saying, listen, Fox News should be purged from existence because they are a mouthpiece for the president. No, I'm like, we just acknowledge that's what Fox News is. They have every right to kiss the president's ass and glaze him. And we just accept it and move on as a function of living in a free country. Everybody but the president of the United States. He continues to say their endorsement of Kamala Harris was actually put dead center on the front page of the New York Times, something heretofore unheard of, ! Again, still waiting for the part where he talks about a crime. He's engaged in a decades-long method of lying about your favorite president, me, my family, business, and the America First movement, MAGA, and our nation as a whole. I am proud to hold this once respectable rag responsible. We are doing with fake news networks, such as our successful litigation against George Sotiropoulos, ABC, Disney, and 60 Minutes, CBS, Paramount, who knew they were falsely smearing me through a highly sophisticated system of document and visual alteration, which was, in effect, a malicious form of defamation. This is unbelievably not true. One, his lawsuit was not successful. They settled with the administration without admitting fault because they knew that the president would use every petty trick in his book to harass them, and it simply wasn't worth it. Again, it was not a successful litigation. A judge never ruled in their favor. What mostly happened is these companies, paid off the president, who, again, as you may recall, the CBS Paramount lawsuit was settled with a large payment to the president. And then days later, a crucial merger between CBS and Skydance was approved by the administration. Crazy, right? So again, they practice this long-term intent and pattern of abuse, which is both unacceptable and illegal. The New York Times has been allowed to freely lie, smear, and defame me for too long. This stops now. The suit is brought in the great state of Florida. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, none of these things are defamation. In fact, it is literally almost impossible in the United States under our Constitution to defame a president. It is so hard because sometimes even hyperbole is protected speech, right? So that's why, for example, Stephen Miller can go on a podcast and say radical left Democrats are terrorists. That's a real quote from him, by the way. And we all know that the Democrats in Congress are many things. But they're so not terrorists. They're barely even alive. Most of them. They're geriatric and essentially completely impotent and useless. Not even close to terrorism. But hyperbole is protected speech within the Constitution. Again, that's why I think Stephen Miller is a bad person, but he's not committing a crime by just saying these things, right? If he were to charge them with terrorism maliciously or use the DOJ to do so when there's no evidence to support it, then he'd be a criminal. But this sort of action is obviously transparently an effort to coerce opposition media. And what I think is even more wild is that they've gone so far that even MAGA's own base is mad at them, because Pam Bondi, the attorney general, came out and said, listen, you ne'er-do-wells, there's free speech, but then there's also hate speech. I'll try to find you the exact quote. And even MAGA themselves absolutely lost their shit. Here we go. Let's see if ABC News will let me actually watch them here. Okay. So here you go. Bondi said the DOJ is actually planning on targeting anyone who engages in what she called hate speech. By the way, hate speech, as in her definition, is expressing criticism of the late Charlie Kirk. She said, quote, there's free speech and then there's hate speech, and there's no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society. She continued, do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who use hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them some action is better than no action? Miller asked in response. She said, we will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech. That's across the aisle, Bondi responded. Now, again, many people responded with a 2024 post from Charlie Kirk in which he said, quote, hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, gross speech, there's evil speech. All of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. And again, shout out to Charlie Kirk for being absolutely 100% correct. If you don't like hate speech, just don't listen to it or say something nice in response. Okay? And this is something that even MAGA themselves doesn't support. Then she continued, she doubled down saying, well, listen, actually, hate speech that crosses the line into threats of violence is not protected by the First Amendment. It's a crime. This is true. But but it doesn't have to be hate speech. Like, it'd be a crime if I texted my neighbor and been like, I'm going to effing kill you. Like, that's a crime. It's not hate speech, right? It's just because I'm mad that he didn't cut his grass or whatever. So you could see even Pam Bondi, right? The administration is so committed to this that even the MAGA base themselves are like, hey, no, like, don't do this. Because the MAGA hardcore people, they understand that if you give the government this power, the next administration can use it to target you. As we've talked about, the whole reason for this is because when you give the government a power, you have to acknowledge that that same power will be possessed by individuals you don't like. Again, imagine if there was a turbo woke president in the future who was like, I'm going to go after you guys you guys aren't sufficiently sad at the killing of this person or that person. I'm going to go after you. So this is just absolutely a huge betrayal. You know it's bad when even the administration's stands are out here loving it, right? You have GOP lawmakers, right, seeking lifetime bans for social media users celebrating Kirk's assassination. These are all actions that are absolutely not permitted in the Constitution. Even the government coercing private companies to do something where the private companies are acting on behalf of the government, that is also an illegal curtailment of free speech. Right? The only time you have these kinds of things is where you go, listen, we're Facebook, and we, without government intervention or influence, have independently come to a decision that we want to ban accounts that do certain things. Okay, that's their decision because they're a private company, right? Again, this is something that has been settled with considerable lawsuits. It's the reason why legally a gay person can order a cake from bakery. The bakery can go, listen, I'm not going to do this. You're compelling me to make speech that I disagree with. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, you're right. You're right. Like, you cannot force someone to produce written or artistic work that says something that they don't believe in. So again, you hope that this sort of thing backfires. I really do. But I am so skeptical and I'm so worried because the danger of coercing free speech, of controlling it, is that once you do it, you prevent the very thing that can push back on it. Again, what happens if the president makes good on silencing left-wing media outlets, left-wing organizers? Well, does that feel like we have a competitive democracy where two sides make their case to the American public in an election and then each side gets to vote? The scales are already screwed up because of campaign finances. And now we're going to screw them up more by saying, hey, whoever's in the White House, they actually have the ability to revoke the broadcast licenses or to impose a bunch of taxes or bury their opposition outlets under a flood of lawsuits until they simply give up, right? All of these things are what's called in international relations competitive authoritarianism. This is this idea, like Russia. Remember, Putin won elections. He won elections against guys like Alexei Navalny. But the reason is that Putin got to be in charge of all media in Russia, and Alexei Navalny got put in jail before every single election. So do you see how there might have been elections in Russia? But there might have even been opposition in Russia. But because people like Vladimir Putin and other autocrats get to put their finger on the scale, they're never really free or fair in any meaningful way. And the fear is that without free speech, America is going to go down the same path. Do you guys want to help the Ukrainians defend Kramatorsk in the east? Well, Ukraine ADOPS has partnered with the best brigades in the Ukrainian military to hold the line in the east. They need drones. They need antennas. They need everything we can get them to keep the Russians at bay. So that's what we're doing. We're working with Ukraine ADOPS for their Fortress Kramatorsk fundraiser. And best of all, there is an anonymous donor who has said he will match, or I don't know, will match up to $300,000 of donations. So every dollar we raise for them is going to be another dollar from our anonymous donor. So if you want to help out the 93rd, the 25th, Azov, the 79th, the 82nd, and the Boys of Liu, most of which I've met actually, you want to click the link in the description and get the fundraiser. Plus, they give you guys some sweet hookups. $250 get you a patch of the Kramatorsk Patrol Police, which is pretty sick. And 2 get you actually that patch plus patch from Corvus, the Corvus drone unit of the 93rd. These are literally some of the best drone pilots in the entire Ukrainian military. You can see honestly, I think it's just badass that their official unit patch has a quadcopter drone. I actually had, when I came back, a friend of all the like patches I was given. One of my buddies was like, "That is the coolest patch I've ever seen." So check it out. The link's in the description. And of course, a huge thank you to our Colonel tier members, guys like Yanko, Georgiev, Bastian, Himmerling, Michael Fry, Christian Schumann, Chris Holmes, Deborah Oppenheimer, and all of our Lieutenant tier members. We couldn't do it without you. Hit that subscribe. See you in the next one. Cheers.